A new study out this morning reveals that almost half of all households in Nunavut did not have access to affordable food in 2016, the year of the study, despite a federal program designed specifically to lower food prices. Michael Serapio's looked through that CMAJ report. Here to tell us more about it. This is worrisome.
Worrisome, and good morning to you, Heather. And for people who don't know the program that we're talking about, it's called Nutrition North, and it was introduced back in 2011, in part in response to the fact that in 2011, 33.1% of families in Nunavut, for example, were dealing with food insecurity. So in comes this program. You would think things would improve, but in fact, they've gotten worse. Take a look at the number right now. According to this study, in 2016, 46% of households were contending with not knowing if, when, where, and how they would get the food that they would need. Certainly not the expectation when Nutrition North was first brought about. Now, for those not familiar with it, it essentially is a federal subsidy that gives money to retailers and suppliers. And the argument here is that you give them money to subsidize the cost of getting perishable and nutritious food to the north. And that would then, the argument goes, drive down the price of food for the average consumer. But not so according to the study from the University of Toronto, as Heather was saying, published today in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. They say this is not what is happening. Food insecurity is now worse than when the program came about. In fact, some families in Nunavut are reporting they are skipping meals, Heather, and not just meals, but whole days without eating because they cannot afford the cost of food where they are.
And yet, a whole program meant to be in place to bring those food costs down. Why do the researchers think this program is failing?
A couple of theories here, and from the researchers themselves. They say part of it has to do with the fact when they brought in Nutrition North, they did away with the previous subsidy, and that subsidy caused non-food essential items, things like clothing, as well as household goods, personal care products. And because that is no longer covered, more people have to use their money to pay for those non-food essentials, which means that food gets a smaller budget month to month. They also say that Nutrition North perhaps was misguided by giving money to retailers because critics say the program does not have price caps. It does not have any form of accountability or enforceability nor transparency. Others also point to the fact that climate change has changed the way life is in the north. It used to be that you would go hunting, but less young people are hunting, as well as climate change is making it harder to find traditional food sources. All of that contributing to the food insecurity that we are seeing. So they want a further study to really pinpoint what's happening here. But from the federal government's point of view, they make the argument that since 2011, when Nutrition North was introduced, they've essentially reduced the cost of food in the north by about 1%, where food has gone up about 10% in other parts of the country. But you have to add to that just what percentages are one thing, but look at the dollar figures, because in many parts of this country, it averages about $216 a month for groceries for one person. In the north, it's about $600 to $700 a month for one person. Now, times that by 4 for a family, you're talking thousands of dollars for groceries alone.
That is a major issue, obviously not going away. And Michael, thank you for bringing us that study. We have been reporting this morning with Michael Serapio on that new Canadian Medical Association Journal report on worsening food insecurity in Nunavut. And the big number gives really a better understanding of the program. According to the report, about 46%, that's nearly half of households in Nunavut, experienced food insecurity in 2016. And that number, a big increase, because when a new program was introduced to deal with this issue specifically, it was about a third of people who were affected by food insecurity. So a worsening picture of food insecurity between the years of 2011 and 2016. And let us get a very important perspective on this issue. Madeleine Redfern is the mayor of Iqauit, and Mayor Redfern happens to be in Ottawa, as she often is on business, so just my luck that I get to see you so directly this morning from our Ottawa bureau. Mayor Redfern, welcome back to our program this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning to you. I'm going to bring up that graphic again of that number, which is the big headline from the CMAJ report conducted by people at U of T, that about nearly half of the people in Nunavut experience food insecurity, and that is a drastically worsening picture from 5 years previous. Does that number surprise you at all?
Not at all, and in fact, there's more food insecurity amongst Inuit in Nunavut because of the income disparity The average household income of Inuit household is about $24,000 compared to non-Inuit in Inuit of $93,000. So there's a lot of food insecurity. One of the shocking stats that came out about 10 years ago was 7 out of 10 Nunavut Inuit preschool children are regularly hungry, 25% of them severely so.
Wow. It's just heartbreaking. I'm getting people tweeting in to say this is just unacceptable. This cannot continue. And yes, it is continuing and indeed worsening. Can you take those numbers and make them human to me and to those watching? Share any anecdotes, share any stories of what you see around you, the people in your community and the food insecurity that they are dealing with.
Well, it's common for people who are on social assistance simply don't have enough to be able to cover off all their living expenses. And they have to make the hard choices of, do they pay rent or power bill that month, or do they buy food for their children? A number of our Inuit households have not only 2, 3, or 4 generations. Sometimes you have 16 people living in a 3-bedroom house. So even if you get your check and you go to the grocery store, you have to really make some hard choices. And then quite often the cupboards and the fridge are bare just a few days later. And so a lot of people are relying, if they can, on family or friends, or if they're in Iqauit, they go to the food bank, of which we have 2. One run by a food center and the other one by the Muslim community.
That's exactly what the report says, this new CMAJ report, that people are choosing to either skip a meal or maybe even skip eating all day because of the fact they just don't have the money to buy. And what this report is looking at is the program called Nutrition North, introduced in 2011, subsidies intended to reduce the cost of food to make perishable food, healthy food, more available to people in the North. Now, this new report doesn't blame the program, doesn't say it is to blame or the cause, but it questions its effectiveness. What role do you think Nutrition North has played in all of this?
Well, Nutrition North actually replaced a program called the Food Mail Program. And there have been a number of adjustments, and I'm happy to say that as of recent consultations, which happened in the last couple of years, there were changes now. So milk is cheaper than it was a year ago. Frozen vegetables, more fruits, they've removed items such as sugary cereals. But of course, when you simply don't have, enough money, because it's really a poverty issue, that $2 milk price difference usually doesn't mean that whether you get to buy milk, you're just really struggling, because a lot of people do not have enough to get by. So there have been some really important adjustments. When I went to the grocery store last week, I was quite happily surprised to see that carrots were almost the same price as in Ottawa. But a vast majority of food is still beyond most people's reach to be able to feed themselves and their family every day of the week.
Okay, so the program with a role, but you're suggesting there are other factors involved in the broader issue of food insecurity, poverty being at the very root. Is that what you're saying this morning?
Yes, so absolutely. People who don't have a job, who are struggling with many issues, including, as I said earlier, overcrowded housing. It makes it very difficult for people to get the sleep that they need, children going to school, completing school. So we need to look at the whole suite of support programs. I'm a very strong proponent in seeing that there are breakfast programs and lunch programs at every school in Nunavut. We need to feed our children to get them to school, complete their education, take advantage of the training and the available jobs in our territory.
And is there one other thing? I mean, you've looked to the broader issues, obviously, to be addressed, but is there one other, it won't be a simple solution, but one key takeaway that needs to be addressed that would be a more immediate response to try to reduce this food insecurity issue, Mayor?
Well, we need to be more strategic in our programs and in our investments. The federal government has provided our territory $566 million for the next 10 years. That sounds like a lot. The fact is, it's not on a year-by-year basis. All levels of government, our Inuit organizations and corporations, because there's actually collectively quite a lot of wealth, but we need to figure out where those investments can be made for the best return. Canada's Arctic is falling further and further behind compared to the other Arctic nations, whether Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, and Scandinavian countries. We can do better. We must do better.
And there you are in Ottawa, perhaps taking this very message to the federal government on this key issue today, and one of our top stories. How wonderful to have your perspective on it this morning. Thank you, Mayor Redfern in Ottawa this morning.
Thank you, Heather.